Hi, LymphoMamma here again. So we left off that my husband and I went up to the emergency at my daughter's college, and I'm going to continue on to still give you a full picture of everything. So we went up to the ER, and they did a CT scan there, and they said there was swollen lymph nodes in her chest. And I knew in the back of my head that she had this x-ray done that showed something bad, but I didn't want to tell Lena that. I wanted her to remain calm because we didn't know what was really going on. And I kept on telling the ER guy, hey, can you look at that x-ray that was done in the morning? And he was like, oh, I haven't gotten to it yet. Can you look at the x-ray? Oh, we need to find it. I was like, please look at the x-ray, because they hadn't done the CT yet. So they did the CT and they looked at the x-ray, and he said, yeah, there's something going on here. There's a lot of inflammation. There's nodes. Oh, you just heard my little doggie. One of these days you're going to meet her in a video when I have to hold her to keep her quiet. So anyway, we told the doctor, look, we need to get her out of here. We live in the DC area. We wanted to go to a teaching hospital because I was told by my relative, a teaching hospital, you get more attention there with the fellows that are there. So the ER guy said, look, the only way you're going to do this is if you get a medical transfer, meaning we just couldn't just leave and go to a hospital in DC. They're not going to accept us. The best way to do it is through a medical transfer from one ER to the other. So he tried Georgetown, which I was like, wow, let's go to Georgetown. I've heard wonderful things about it. But Georgetown couldn't take us because they were full. And he said, your only other choice is Children's National. And I'm thinking, oh no, I mean, she's 19 years old. They're not going to take her. And he was like, I don't know if they're going to take her. I think their age limit is 18. And he came back and he said, I have good news. Children's takes patients up to 24 years old. So he got a medical transfer going, and we were on our way. I told my husband to stay with Lena, and I went over to her dorm at 3:30 in the morning to gather up some stuff for her. Thank goodness of Waze, because I didn't know where I was to begin with, and it was dark, and it was 3:30 in the morning, and I was pretty tired. I got over to the dorm, and I used her little key card and went in, and I just used my flashlight on the phone, and I packed up her laptop and a lot of winter clothes and makeup and whatnot, and her roommate was asleep through all of it. It was awesome. Got back, and we left at 4:30 for our journey to Children's National in Washington, D.C. I thought this would be an easy trip because we're leaving at 4:30. We're not going to get any traffic. So we're driving and driving, and it was a very somber ride. Everybody was really quiet. Lena was just out of it, just so exhausted. And Adrian and I, Adrian's my husband, we didn't really talk much. We were just in shock, and we wanted to get our daughter to the hospital, and we didn't want to talk to have Lena think we're worrying. So we were just all mummies driving. And then all of a sudden, the road closes. Can you believe it? At like 5:30 in the morning, 3 garbage trucks get in an accident and they close the road. And I was like, oh my God, all I want to do is get my daughter to the hospital. So we had to go these back ways, and it was so backed up. Finally got through that, and now we're getting stuck in DC morning rush hour traffic. And Waze, who's my best friend now, took us in an incredible way. We had to go over the Potomac River and came back on the Potomac River to go back on the Potomac River the other way. It was crazy. So a 2.5-hour trip should have took us 5.5 hours. But we finally got to the ER of Children's National Hospital. And it all started then. You know, doctors were coming in. It was just crazy. And my son was texting me, I forgot to say this, my other son, who was in New York, that he was taking the train down to be with us right away. And my husband and I kept on telling him on text, no, don't come now, don't come now. Because, why would he come? We just need to focus on Lena. But he insisted on coming, and he met us there at the ER. And I got to say, this is one thing, another tip for a caretaker. You need to have another family member there that can sit back and help you out. He was such a help note-taking, because you always have told, you need to write everything down the doctor says. Well, I've never been a good note-taker. I'm not a good student in school. And my husband takes too good of notes. Both of us had to focus on Lena and focus just processing what the doctor was saying. So Nathan, that's my older son, he was there on his phone, and he took down all these notes, and it was great because he gave those notes to my sister and to the pulmonologist in the family, who was a great help for the first few weeks talking to the doctors. So, and it was just really good for my daughter to have her brother there. She knew that the other brother was home with the dog, and this brother was there with her. And to this day, she remembers how he was feeding her Panera sandwich because she was so weak to feed herself. So, my goodness, we were in the emergency for 11 hours. Can you imagine that? We were just zombies. Finally, around 11 o'clock, they brought us up to the oncology ward, and my husband and son went home. And the next day, at 8 in the morning, Lena went under anesthesia to get a biopsy of her neck. It was pretty scary. We never told this to Lena, but the doctors had told us, look, we're going to try to get a biopsy in the neck. We don't really feel one there, but if we can't get it, we're going to have to crack her sternum to go into near her lungs, and that is a very dangerous procedure. So we were just like mortified. Anyway, they did the procedure, and they only had to get a biopsy in her neck, thank God. And she was coming to in, where you wait. And these two doctors came in, and they said, well, we did the procedure, and it typically takes 24 hours to get the results. So we were like, okay. I think another hour went by, and those two doctors came back in, and we could tell just by their face that it wasn't good news. Your hearts really have to go out to these doctors when they have to share things about your loved ones, especially if it's a child. But they said it should have taken 24 hours to get the test results, but it came back from pathology within the hour that it definitely is Hodgkin's lymphoma. That was the first time we heard those words, Hodgkin's lymphoma. I never heard that. I didn't know what it was. And the doctor said, look, the good news is this is the best of the worst cancer to get. Well, that made me feel good for a minute, but just a minute. Anyway, we went home, and then we had to come back a few days later. So we went home knowing that my daughter has cancer. I have a dog that has dementia. I didn't know where we were going to go with all this, and we had to go back in a few days later to get a bone marrow biopsy and get her port installed. A port, is where it goes in, and they could do the chemo directly inside you instead of going through a vein. Now, here's another pointer I wanted to tell you, because I had called a dear friend who had a form of non-Hodgkin's, and she said, oh, Paula, that bone marrow biopsy is so painful. So I was like, oh my gosh, my daughter has to go through this pain. Well, it wasn't painful for Lena, because the protocol at Children's National, and I think it would be at all children's hospitals, is that you go under anesthesia for a bone marrow biopsy. And what we did, we combined the bone marrow biopsy with the installation of the port, so she wouldn't have to go under an additional time under anesthesiology. So they did that, And the good news came back that she did not have cancer in her bone marrow. So my daughter was diagnosed with stage 3B Hodgkin's lymphoma.